This is the Coming Home Podcast with John Allen. There we go. You know what? Let's just start right away. Let's get all the small talk and everything in on the episode. Yeah. Let me just introduce everybody to you. Welcome everybody to this episode of the Coming Home Podcast with John Allen. And today I'm speaking with Anthony Kalinde.
Yes.
There you go. That's a Bantu pronunciation there.
Yeah. How are you? It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm doing so well. Thank you for coming on. You know, we have a common friend, a mutual friend, Eirik Sørvik. He's been on my podcast twice, 2 or 3 times. And I just love that guy. I don't get the opportunity to speak with him that often, but when I do, it's always good conversation. I know him through the standup community. I think I met him in Drammen the first time I met him, but since then I run into him in Oslo a couple of times. And what a guy. And he's been after me for quite some time to talk with you and have you on. So here we are.
All right, cool.
So the success or failure of this episode rests on Eirik Sørvik, just so that's known.
Yeah, I'll blame him for everything as well.
He can take it. He can take it. Yeah. You seem to have an interesting background. From what I understand, you're the son of a diplomat.
Yes. We used to call ourselves diplobrats. Run around, in foreign countries. My mother was a diplomat, and I think I left my home country when I was maybe 8 or 9.
Malawi, right?
Malawi. And we moved to Ethiopia. So I kind of did my high school and sort of spent my early formative years in Ethiopia. Then we moved to Switzerland. I did a bit of time in South Africa. Maybe I should say I did a bit of time. I spent a bit of time in South Africa, England. And then finally I did my bachelor's in Geneva. Interesting. And it was a sort of an interesting trade-off because my older brother, who's 10 years older than me, he was 19, 18 turning 19 when we were leaving Malawi, right? So by the time he was 24, 25 and done with college, he was, I'm going home. I'm done. I'm going home. So when I go to Malawi and visit, if we can go see the butcher, a doctor, the bar, barbershop, and he knows them. You know, he has the background story. I want to school with that guy. I want to school with that guy's kid, so on and so forth. And I will sort of probably never have that, at least until I settle down long enough somewhere. But I do have maybe 6, 7 countries where I can go, hey man, I need a place to crash. I'll be over there for a week or so, and that'll be no problem, just because that's how I grew up, right?
That must be really cool to have that set of friends, that international set of friends where you can, drop in pretty much anywhere or at least several different places in the world, and you've got a friend there. You've got somebody you can hook up with and kind of lead you around and show you what's what and all that. What is it that is it the diplomatic status that brought you to Norway, and how long ago was that?
No. I stopped being a diplomat at 25, right? So at 25, you graduate out of diplobrathood because your mother's or your parents' status can no longer protect you. You're now an adult, right?
Right.
So you have to go out into the world and make your own way. At the time, I was doing my bachelor. I was just finishing my bachelor's in IT in Switzerland, and I started working for the UN. I did that for a wing of the UN, a wing of the UN called the United Nations Institute for Training and Research. Right. So I was doing some IT over there. It's an arm of the UN that does a lot of so whenever the UN releases a new mandate or whatnot, and there's a requirement to train member states on this new mandate. They have several wings of the UN that sort of put together training packages for these sort of get member states on board, like environmental law, or maybe it'll be peacekeeping training, where they go, okay, this is how we do peacekeeping from now on, and that sort of there'll be all member state wide edict, if you will, where they sort of roll out all this training material. And I was doing one of my first jobs working IT was working for that project.
And where were you located when you first started working that project?
In Switzerland, in Geneva.
In Geneva, okay.
That's where I did my bachelor's. And so my mom was stationed there when I turned 16. So my mom was stationed there for the African Union, which was I guess it has the similar mandates to the EU in that its aims are similar, but it has a lot less reach, and it's a lot more in its infancy. Yeah. But there's some very interesting things coming out of that union as well, coming up now.
Well, at times there's, if anyone who pays attention to international news, at times I've seen that a lot of talk has been about the lack of effectiveness of the African Union, but at times about the actual effectiveness of it. Where do you think the African Union stands now as far as influence and power and being in a position to do anything worthwhile for African nations?
So I think, again, like I've been living in the West for a long time, right? So I feel like I'm definitely talking from the outside looking in. But I do visit home. I try to visit Malawi as often as I can. I still stay home, even though I left more than 20 years ago, right?
Do you feel that kinship to Malawi still?
When I go, yeah.
When you're there,
When I'm over there, there's this just hey, I am from here, and I also have my mother tongue, right? So and I think like the difference is like it's like when I come to the airport here in Norway, right? When you come to the airport here in Norway and you say you're not speaking Norwegian or anything like that, and it's ID and so on and customs and so on. But when you come into Norway after a few times and you go, hi, guy. I remember I was coming from India. I was doing a training session in India where I was training some guys in India, and I came back for work for a client. And my customs, and the lady says, what is the mark? I was like, oh, yeah, I'm at the India. And she goes, oh. Whatever I was like, oh, I'm with the and living there from Kunde. And she was like, oh, even why I go up? And I was like, no, I'm gonna make a bot. It was like, oh, stab. You know that feeling, right?
Yeah. Now you and I understand everything you said, but for my non-Norwegian speakers back home in the States, it's basically just bantering back and forth between them. And the cool part is that they it's a piece of home for you now. That you're here. Yeah. So I any place where I feel like I have that ability to sort of banter to the customs agent at the airport, and it'd be like fun and sort of lighthearted, and there'd be no tension whatsoever. Then that's definitely a bit like home, right? Well, yeah, and I noticed when I've been here in Norway for 19 years now. And it's been a strange transformation when it comes to identity. It seems like the longer I'm here, the more aware of my Americanness, if you will, I become. And on top of that, the more I'm aware of my blackness.
Right.
And I don't know what that is. I can't explain it. I don't know if that is a longing for home, a homesickness, or I don't know if it's a manifestation or a realization that I'm not a typical resident of Norway. You know what I mean? I can't figure out where to place that feeling or that experience of otherness. I don't know where.
So I've lived in like a few places, right? 6, 7 countries at different ages of my life. I've learned different sort of stages of adulthood and different sort of language gaps, if you will. And so for me, I definitely feel like I have an experience of sort of getting to a place, feeling what I identify myself as sort of in that new place, because I think there's always a transition when you go to a new place. There's some sort of not the transformation or a recreation as such, but people don't know you. You can be whoever you want to be, right? And so I think that opportunity, whether it's pronounced or not, I think still manifests as a small transformation in personality change, right? And I think that in some places you notice yourself change at a personality level,
Sure.
But in some places, you then sort of notice your otherness, if you will.
Yeah.
I love going to France a lot. Back when you could go places, right?
Yeah.
And I remember I did a really geeky project where I competed in a hackathon in France, right? And I remember saying to my friend, who's like a tall, very white Swiss guy, and a tiny Iranian woman. Like she's like 5'7" and 5'6". She's not tiny. I'm sorry. I love you much. Anyway, and I remember saying to them, I was like, I don't feel black here, right? Because France is so multicultural,
yes,
right?
Yes.
I'm walking through the airport, customs police walk by, and I'm like, hey, why didn't you notice me? I don't feel special, right?
Right.
Whereas I feel like in Norway, every once in a while, it's not like I feel like I want to get stopped or harassed or anything, but I do feel noticed. And I'm like, is that in my head, really?
If you want to get noticed, let's take a trip to, I don't know, where are they kicking black people's ass now in the States? Let's go to Chicago, for example, and just tap on a policeman's shoulder and just see what happens.
I wrote a post like a while back, like a love letter to Norway, where I was like, "Thank you for not shooting me, guys. Really appreciate it." Because I hear some shit about my brothers in America, and it's like, oh my god, what the hell? But
no, it is. I can imagine. I was going to say I can imagine that Paris, or I'm sorry, France, or actually just about any European country is quite different for a person of color than Norway. To hear Norwegians, to hear some Norwegians tell it, Norway is almost overrun with black and brown people, but that's just not the case. That's not the case. There are concentrations of us in, for example, in Oslo. You live in Oslo, right? There's concentrations of black and brown people there, but if you look at the country as a whole, we are not that many. So then, when you go to some place like France, and maybe especially Paris, there is that multicultural, that colorful sub-society that is there within the greater French society. Yeah. And when I say greater, I mean larger in numbers. Yeah.
Yes, I would agree with you. I would also sort of I would think that perhaps well, I was going to say earlier that the statistics on sort of how many sort of black and brown, if you will, non-white ethnicity people live in Norway is apparently, last I checked, the last I heard, it's probably around 3%.
Yes.
Right? Now, there might be localized around Norway, but it's 3%, right, of 5 million people who are not from Europe, who are immigrants living here, who are not from anywhere from this side. And I think to then go from that to we're overrun, I think is also it's also one of those things where it's like, it's probably an aspect of today's social media, right? Because
I think so.
Somebody will,
Well, some people are out there who have that as their agenda. They'll go out there, and as part of their agenda, they will put that microscope on all things negative that have to do with what's happening with people of color here in Norway, which will then give someone who is, I call it people who have a sense of insecurity about their own culture, because to me, the Norwegian culture is quite strong. I mean, it's very much in place. There's a lot of tradition here. So why are people so afraid that something is threatening that strong, well-established thing that is called Norwegian? We are not that many people here. And of those of us who are here, most of us are doing life in the right way. It's just that the negative cases are getting amplified, unfortunately.
Yeah, and statistically speaking, majority of minority immigrants, if you will, or first generation, second generation, majority of them are trying to do life in the right way. Yeah. Statistically speaking, that's just the count. Especially in sort of wealthier European countries or the wealthier states in the U.S., where you have sort of highly educated immigrants, highly skilled immigrants migrating in, right?
But even the ones that are not highly educated, even people of a more of a common level, an average level of education, if you will, even those people are not taking from society. They still, and I'm sure you agree. But it's important to point out anyway. Basically, we all want the same thing. Everybody who's walking the earth wants the same thing. Of course, there's nuance, but people basically just want to have a good life. People basically believe that most other people are good.
Yes.
And if we could just take that as the starting point, and I guess I'm speaking directly to Norwegians, take that as the starting point. Let people prove to you that they as an individual don't fall into that category of good people.
Yeah.
Just assume the best, and then take it from there.
There was a quote that I like referring to because the person who said it surprised me, right? Yeah. I hope I'm not getting this wrong, but I think the quote goes like this. It goes, I'm getting it wrong, but the gist of it was we always tend to think so much of our own intentions and so little of other people's actions, of the others' actions. And I think it was phrased around in that way. But it was said by George Bush after his presidency, which I found very interesting. And I don't know if that was sort of a genuine thing or just a speech or whatever, but I thought as a concept, as an idea, that the way to sort of relate to otherness, and I feel like there's a lot of sort of well-documented research on the subject, that the idea is the way that you reproduce racism is by sort of stopping exposure to otherness. Yeah. If you expose those people to otherness, all of a sudden it goes away. This lady, Jane Elliott, goes, give me all the schools for 50 years, I'll squash racism. I believe her. I completely think it's a total, it's a constructed phenomenon that we can sort of curb if we want to tomorrow. If we use today's social media, we could curb it probably in a few hours. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that lady, by the way, is a true soldier for justice. She has done such good work since the early 70s, if not the late 60s, in bringing awareness. I don't know how many minds she has changed, but I would imagine it's in the thousands. She's bringing that awareness to the foolishness, the stupidity, the illogic, the unnaturalness of racism. Wow, she's been doing the work.
She has been doing the work. I mean, I just hope somebody gives her all the schools in the world at some point. Yeah. Let's sort of make that a thing that everybody goes through and learn, because I think it can't be understated that, well, if we're sort of educating kids to live in the modern world, I mean, for example, I'm from Malawi, right? I grew up it's definitely one of the bottom 20 poorest countries in the world, right? And a person studying the same subject as me is competing for the same job as me, perhaps anywhere in the world right now, right? I don't think it's again, things like reactions like trying to close borders and all that stuff, they're taking our jobs and all that stuff. I think all those reactions are sort of missing the point. The world is just going to get smaller and smaller and smaller until, the so-called boundaries don't make the same sense anymore.
Let me ask you a question about identity and, I don't know, personal pride. You're living a life that is far from what the average Malawian lives. If you were a diplomat from the United States, if you were the son of a diplomat from the United States, you would be living a life that is much different from what the average American would live. So if we acknowledge that you're living a life that's quite different from the average Malawian, what does that do to you when it comes to your sense of identity? Now, you said you still identify with your homeland, but you have lived away from your homeland for quite a number of years and in a very different way.
Much longer than I've lived at home, actually.
Yeah.
No, I think that's identity is a hard question, right? So how do you define identity to begin with, right? I know when I was younger, I would define identity as sort of something quite tangible. But I nowadays I think of identity more as something that I identify with, right? The process of identification is sort of this identity. At least it's what it seems to me. It seems more a mechanism of my intent to identify than sort of who I am. Of course, I feel like I'm formed by sort of all the people that I've seen, the food that I've ate, the places that I've been, and so on, right? But at the core of it, I wouldn't say that I feel like I'm an average Malawian, whatever that might entail, right? Yeah. Simply because I'm just so removed from the culture. But I'm not really I'm not an average Westerner, if you call that a thing, because that's sort of quite broad either, right?
That's very broad. That's very broad. As an American, I identify with things that are quite different than, for example, a person from France. Still in the West, but there's enough nuance, there's enough difference in experience and interpretation that I don't see very much in common between me and a Frenchman.
Yeah. But I definitely feel. I don't want to say if I could say I just feel African. That just sounds like I feel African, man. It just sounds over here. But like. I definitely feel like when I am in Malawi, when I'm traveling through Africa, when I go through customs checks, when I talk to police, when I talk to people in authority, when I talk to the vendor by the street and so on, I feel like I can relate to them in a way that is perhaps quite unique compared to anywhere else in the world. And I think that maybe that's just a function of that. I don't remember having to learn the language.
Okay.
Maybe it's just a function of that. But I have that sort of unique, I feel like I can relate to you guys. And maybe they don't feel that way about me. Maybe it's just me. You don't feel like I can relate to them. Like, they're like, I'm
Yeah.
Maybe that's just me.
What languages do you speak?
Not as many as I should. I've forgotten a few. I speak English. I speak some French. Although I haven't spoken French on a day-to-day basis in like 5 years, so I shouldn't say I still speak French. But I understand a lot of French probably, and if I'm in a French country for 3 or 4 days, it'll come right back. I speak my mother tongue, or my father tongue rather, and then sort of basic intermediate Norwegian.
Now, what is your mother tongue called?
So my mother tongue is called Ngonde, and my father tongue is called Chichewa.
Chichewa.
Right? Yeah, because Malawi, Africa is it's a mosaic, right? Yeah. And the Malawi region historically, like going way back, was sort of like it's where nomads used to sort of come through quite a bit. Yeah. And at the time that the British were invading, you had sort of some sedentary tribes that were sort of doing a horticultural living, and then you also had these sort of marauding raiding tribes that would sort of move without their women, go conquer some place, stay there for a bit, be like, yeah, you guys are ours now, we're gonna keep moving on, our women are coming to raise you, and so on. But apparently when they got to Malawi, for some reason, the women portion of the contingent that would sort of then come and raise the newly conquered people didn't make it all the way. So they were then raised by the locals of that area. So their culture was subsumed into the general Chewa tribes. So they're actually called Chewa, but originally they were called Lingoni, but now they're called the Chewa.
So it is something of a melting pot then.
Yes, historically, that whole area was a whole melting pot. And again, when this colonization started happening, it would sort of catch people at different phases of sort of how they live and how they move around, right?
Yes.
There was quite a few tribes that were, the larger empires at the time was sedentary and horticultural, but there was still a lot of tribes that were sort of nomadic or sort of hunter-gatherers or marauders.
There's a lot of history there. I cannot remember this guy's name, but one of the kings of Malawi, going centuries, if not thousands of years back, is said to be the richest man to ever have lived.
Mali. Oh, come on. I've been trying to write a bit about him for like years. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. Not years. For as long as I've been doing stand-up. Mansa Musa.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
I've been trying to write a bit about Mansa Musa for as long as I've known about Mansa Musa and for as long as I've been doing stand-up. I think it's such an amazing story. There's one article that's talks about how his procession. He had this one trip where he goes, "I'm going to go to Mecca from Mali, so he's going to go all the way through Egypt, all the way to Mecca, and come back." And he takes like a convoy, a procession, and the convoy procession was so big that you could see it from space.
Yes. Yeah.
That blows my mind. So yeah,
and that's right. He was king of Mali, not king of Malawi. Yeah.
Mali.
Yeah, exactly. I got that a little mixed up. Yeah.
He was. Sorry, I'm just trying to turn up the music, the sound there.
No, I'm getting my West African sub-Saharan countries mixed up there.
No, you could. No, he was the king of Mali. He was the Asian king of Mali, and he was a trader king basically. And this is an interesting thing about a lot of the trader kings of that time. And one of the things that religion was just so creepy for us was because a lot of trader kings looked to convert religions or adopt religions as a way to make it easier to do trade.
Yes.
So when Islam came around, they're like, cool, our gods are ancestors. No beef with your God. We can adopt. Yeah. Right? Because in general, sub-Saharan Africa tended to have this ancestral worship or this sort of this non-exclusive worship sort of paradigm where it was okay to adopt other gods.
Yeah, it was more of a tribal multi-deity type of thing until Islam came around. Yeah,
and then things like sort of Christianity when that came around, it was like, oh, okay, we're gonna do the same thing we do with this. And it's like, no, this was a trap.
Oh, that's a whole history lesson right there. So let me ask you though. Okay, so you're trying to work the story of King Mali into your stand-up routine.
Yeah.
I find myself also plugging in a lot of things African and a lot of things Black American into my stand-up routine, and those are some of my best bits. The Norwegians, at the same time as those bits can make them very uncomfortable, they also I wonder if their laughter is kind of a relief from the uncomfortableness in the way that I present those kind of jokes and routines. Yeah.
So I remember seeing you. I think it was the first time I saw you on stage. It was at Steiner's open mic, right? And you go up on stage, and I remember like sitting there going, "Hey, the Black guy." I remember thinking that, which is like a weird reflex. I'm like, "Oh, hey." It only happens in Norway, right?
Yeah, I was going to say it's really not that weird. I mean, I'm the same way. If I see a Black face in certain situations, it is a surprise. It is unusual.
Yeah. So you go up on stage, and your first three jokes about I think you remember correctly. And I remember telling Ida, I was like, I hate that I remember this. I don't know why I remember this so much. Not that I hate, but you're joking around. And you were saying that I'm American and I'm different from Africans because Africans smell. And I was like, dude, what's the only two Black guys in here? Like, come on, guys.
You know what? Yeah. It was a little different. It wasn't as blunt as that African smell, but I said something about, you can tell. I kind of went through like a short list of how to tell that I'm not African, and one of them I said was the smell.
Yeah.
And
it was funny. Don't get me wrong. It was funny. And then, but I was just sitting there. I was like, I'm African. And hey.
Well, I remember I pointed you out. Do you remember that? Because I started talking. I started saying I talked a lot of shit about. Talked a lot of shit about Nigerians and the drug trade and how I got propositioned on my way in. And then I said, you're not Nigerian, are you? And I pointed at you.
I was like, but we're the only Black guys in here. Pick on them. There's so many of them. I'm playing. It was just funny.
No, I use that a lot to, I don't know, I guess it depends on the crowd, but very often it helps me to set the stage, because what I see as a stand-up. Now, I never did stand-up back home in the U.S. I've only done stand-up since I've been here in Norway. But I can see just about every time when I get on the mic, people are like, oh, this is going to be different. because I'm black, but then also when I start speaking English, because I do my routine in English, and then they hear I'm from the States, then they really get curious. And so my goal then is to set the stage and show them that, yeah, I'm different, but then my routine is going to be different again. You're not going to hear the normal things, and I'm going to confront you on a few things. So then I jump right into the race and the skin color and the otherness and all of that, and just
I remember this is like just before the second lockdown, I suppose. I remember going on stage and like looking at the crowd and just like pausing for a moment and then being like, so I'm black, right? And I look at them and they kind of look at me kind of hesitant, and I go, I say that because I know some of you don't see color, and they really enjoyed that for some reason. I was like, okay, good. And then I go, apparently my life matters.
Apparently
my life matters. I didn't know up until, just a few months ago. Thank you for letting me know. My mom gave me some ideas, but some hints and so on. But I think that for me, I hope that when I'm talking that way and poking fun at things, that it does make you sort of think about it in a way that
yes,
without tension, right? Without any sort of charged emotion, because I think the charged emotion sort of blocks people from accepting new ideas.
Well, the emotion is the laughter. The emotion is the fun, the funniness, and it's a good mix, and it can really, at the same time as it will raise the tension, it also gives a sense of relief because they can laugh. But I'm very vocal about things that I think are wrong here in Norway, but I try to do it in a constructive way, and I try to do it in a humorous way. So I'm joking about things that are quite serious, and people know they're serious. I take prejudice and racism and otherness, and I hit it on the head. But when you throw that humor in there, it's such a confusing thing that brings relief.
Yeah, this is one of the most amazing dynamics about stand-up, I think, and also why bombing can be so can just suck the energy out of the room, because the mechanics of telling a good joke or having a good routine, I think, is sort of building up tension, and then releasing the tension, right? Now, if you sort of bomb, it's like but you manage to build up the tension, but you didn't manage to release it, then you just have this tense room. and there's no release.
But it's very crowd dependent. It's very location dependent. That set that I did that night, the first night you saw me, that was brand new material. That was my first night trying that material out. And it went over well that night, I think. And
I did. I remember.
And then the next night I did the same material here in Drummond, and I bombed. I mean, people were almost literally scratching their heads. They just didn't get it.
Oh, wow.
They didn't get it. I didn't get the same, I didn't feel right with the delivery, and the people just weren't getting it. So it's real interesting, but I think Norwegian crowds are different I can go back to, way back to like 2005, 2006, because I'm a musician as well.
Yeah.
And I remember this one night I'm performing in Oslo with my band, and we're playing this funky song, get up and dance type of song. Yeah. And there's an instrumental breakdown, like a few bars of a guitar solo. And I'm the lead vocalist, and I say on the mic, I say, yeah, y'all can get up and dance if you want to. And everybody just looked at me like, why would we do that?
Why do you want to ruin a good night, bro?
Well, and then I'm thinking, oh my God, this is terrible. These people hate me. And all night long, people were just kind of looking and just, and I felt like they just weren't digging it at all. But then when we were finished and I would come off the stage, I couldn't leave for almost 3 hours. There were other bands that played after us. I couldn't leave for almost 3 hours because people were practically mobbing me with compliments and feedback and questions and stuff. And that's so Norwegian. That reserved response, that almost analytical way of taking in entertainment. Bill Burr said this on a talk show once. He says it's very difficult for him to come over here to Scandinavia and do stand-up and get a good response because Scandinavians are so analytical. You know, they're like, why is that funny? This plus this equals that. Why would you do that? Why would you say, and they do this analytical. I don't know if that's what it is, but I found that my material, the response to it can vary quite a bit. And I think that's a special Norwegian way of responding. I don't know what you think.
I'm inclined to agree with you. I mean, Eirik and I talk about this quite often where we go like, what's up with Norwegian crowds? Not in a bad way or in a sort of like a
It's just different. It's just different. Because ultimately, it's our fault if the crowd doesn't respond. We have to get that crowd.
Exactly. I like when Seinfeld sort of when you see his documentaries where a comedian sort of comes in and is blaming the crowd for something, and he's just like, no, it's your responsibility. Yeah. I'm totally with that. I completely concur. The crowd does not owe me anything, right? No. I remember this one set that we did. Was the comedian that came before us. I don't know what he was doing. He was having like a bit of a meltdown day or something, and he started cussing the crowd out. And because some of them were talking while he was doing his set, he started cussing them out. And the first couple of times he cussed them out, he got them on his side, right? And then it carried on and carried on and carried on, and he lost them. To the point where the host had to be like, you're gonna grab the mic, you're gonna go off. And then he goes off, and the crowd now there's been a lot of tension built up, but it wasn't released. Now, I'm in the back with Eirik and all the other comedians, and I'm supposed to go on next. And every other comedian's like, dude, he's ruined the room. And I'm sitting there, I'm excited. I'm like, somebody in, coach, because my sense of it was, at least they have an emotion. Yeah. At least they're charged. It's not flat, tepid. There's something going on. I can play with that, right? And I'm like scratching out jokes, rewriting stuff, scratching out jokes. Okay. No, I'm ready. I had a great time, right? The first 5 minutes were rough. I had to sort of, really bring them along. And I remember again, the next 5 minutes were sort of, I thought quite good compared to how I started and compared to what the room was like before I got there, right? And then afterwards, I got a lot of compliments from people. You had a really good set. That guy ruined it for you, though. You had a really good set. And again, in the moment, I couldn't hear the laughter on stage. But when I saw the video Eirik took from me, I could then hear the laughter, right?
I've experienced that as well. I record the audio on all of my sets. And there have been times where, especially when I'm trying out new material, where I'm thinking, I'm very much in my head. I'm not in the moment, and I'm thinking, oh man, this sucks. These people aren't laughing. Right. And then I'll go back and listen to my recording. Oh my God, they were laughing. They were laughing. But I wonder if that's that, because you have to, when you're coming up with new material, or I find anyway, that I have to be a little bit in my head. I have to think about the delivery. And instead of just saying what I want to say, I'm saying what I want to say, but I'm also examining the crowd to check that reaction because it's new material. But after a while, when I've worked in the material, I just kind of take it for granted that it's going to be funny. And but that's after a long analytical, that's not arrogance. That's just knowing after a long process that, these people like this. And then I can get out of my head and I can be more in the moment. But to me, stand-up is quite a cerebral endeavor. I mean, and I think even for those of us who do it and we seem to be comfortable, I think there's still at some point in that creation process where you're very much in your head, analyzing the meaning, analyzing the delivery.
Yeah, I read this book. I think it was Greg Dean or somebody called Stefan Rosenfeld. I'll find you the title. But in the book, he was describing how he tries to critique his stand-up from a critique position, and then perform his stand-up or practice performing his stand-up from the practice position. So he marks out different spots in his space, right? And he goes, okay, I'm going to practice over here. When I'm going to come down and sit and think about it, I'm going to be over here in this position. So that when I'm in my head, this is the spot where I'm allowed to be in my head. But when I'm standing over there, I'm not allowed to be in my head. Over there, I'm standing there, I'm projecting, and I'm performing. And one of the things that was very interesting that he talked about in the book was saying that, practicing for stand-up is quite hard to do, right? But one of the things he was sort of trying to flesh out, which I think he did articulated very well, was to say that if you look at what all jokes are, or what all moments for jokes are, it's often like the most organic jokes that come up. They normally come up as a response to something, right? As a response to the event, as a response to what someone says, as a response to some thought or idea. And as long as you can get the audience or the people feeling the thing that made you respond that way, right? And as long as you're responding to that, then it becomes an appropriate joke for that moment because you're responding to that now, right? So when I started thinking about that, I was like, okay, this is very interesting. And as you say, it's a very cerebral sort of process where you sit there going, okay, I'm practicing at home in my apartment. The energy level that I have and the projections that I have is completely different to how I'm going to feel in a room full of people.
Sure, yeah.
Right? And again, for me, sometimes I'll walk in and it's like, it's a room full of white people. I'm like, God damn it. There's a moment in my head where I go, okay. No, come on, seriously, it's fine. Right? But there's a moment where you kind of go, is this? No, it's fine.
Yeah.
Because it's not like I don't know it's fine, or I don't think it's fine. But I also, for example, I feel like except for like Steiner's spot where I kind of like when it was going, I would kind of be there often, and I'm like, how many have you seen before? I'm like, we know you, Anthony. I'm like, okay, great. So I can just start trying to do new material, right? Yeah. But when I did do places that sort of people haven't heard of me or people don't know me, then I feel like I have to open up with some why am I here jokes, and I have to. Otherwise, they're sort of still thinking, why are you here? Right?
I find that I do better at the places that I've never been before.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yep.
I like, I don't know, maybe it's a self-confidence thing actually when I think about it, but I like the anonymity of it.
Right. I get you.
It seems to be more spontaneous. The best show I ever did was at a place I had never been before with people who I didn't know at all. And that's the best I ever did. Yeah. I opened for Zahid Ali.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. That's fun. Sounds fun. That sounds really fun.
So your creative process, you said a little bit about that, but do you write? Do you physically sit down and write, or do you think of things in your head and then you just try to work it out in a live setting?
No, I have a pretty cerebral process. I try to sort of I experiment with different methods of joke mining, word lists and such, and tell one story, tell the other story, kind of where you go, okay, I'm going to tell this. When I tell this story, then I'm going to reinterpret this story to mine for a setup and punchline, right? So I try to sort of do a lot of that when I get the chance to. Again, it's not my full-time job, right? I started doing stand-up, say, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago now. This last year doesn't count because COVID robbed us.
It doesn't count at all.
No, it doesn't count. It's just not canon. We're gonna pretend it's just not canon and keep going. But I find that I think there's a lot of good science in stand-up.
Oh yeah.
Like there's a lot of good brain doctors who sort of write about stand-up and the process of laughter and so on. But I find very, very interesting. And I know for me, one of the things I try to do is I try to have an idea first, sit down, and then sort of say, this is what I want to say, and I want to say it in a funny way, and try to do that, right?
How often do you do that?
Lately, not much at all. lately I've been focusing more on the day job just because that's sort of like still alive very much, right? But when sort of COVID was sort of not a thing, like when I'm doing it, because again I've been doing maybe a show or two shows. I've been doing I'll be going up 2 or 3 times a week at best. But more likely maybe 2 when things are sort of pre-open somewhere all over. So you get a chance at at the Steinman is I get a chance to go up at maybe Uhart, you get a chance to go up at maybe Henriken before it closed. And then you had it moved over to Lincoln's.
That's right.
So yeah. So there's more and more places are open. I started at night. I had a sort of a night where I was giving people like 15, 20 minutes to sort of just get used to it, right? And that was really fun, right? So at that time, it was sort of like I leave an evening, I get off, come home from having tried to set, try to write a bit. Next day I have work. Maybe in the evening, sort of maybe relax a bit, errands. And if I, have the time, I'll probably try to do at least 5-10 minutes, at least up to an hour at the time. Maybe 2 or 3 times a week because it'll be in and around. I have a show, I just did a show. I have a show, I just did a show. I remember at the time when I thought this is going really, really well, I said, no, this is going too well. I should bomb. I should bomb so that I can get better. And I remember going up on stage telling Ida, I want to bomb tonight.
But I enjoy bombing. There is one time that I got upset. I got real upset that I bombed, and it was that time, that first show after Steinage when you saw me, and I tried that material. I was so proud of it. I was feeling good, and then I bombed, and I got really, really upset. Right. But generally, in fact, not generally, but every other time besides that, when I have bombed, I think it's funny. I laugh at myself. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe. It's a learning process because it's literally a learning process. It literally will tell you what works and what doesn't. Yes. So if I bomb, then I learned something, because then I'll always go back again and I'll listen to it, and it's like, okay, well, the material was good, but I stumbled over the delivery, because my delivery is very important because I do it in English, and while the Norwegians who are there understand English, still it's not their first language. So some of the play on words, some of the nuance and stuff, if I stumble over that or if I mess it up in some way, then the whole joke or the whole story is just, I've wasted my time. Then they're not going to get it. So it's always a learning experience when I bomb. It doesn't bother me. It really doesn't.
It's what was it? Dave Chappelle goes. Somebody asks him, "What happens when you tell a joke and people don't laugh?" And he goes, "Nothing." And I thought that was the funniest comeback to that comment. It's true. Nothing happens. Absolutely nothing.
And what I've seen some of us who bomb and then freeze. You freeze and then, that one line that doesn't get any laughter, and then you freeze, and then the rest of your time on the mic is ruined for that evening. That's I understand how that can happen, but oh my gosh, you just got to roll with it. I enjoy it when I bomb. It's funny. I've learned something. What I found.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
I was going to say that I'm an open micer, right? What Seinfeld says, you're the age on stage, you're the age that you've been performing for, right? So I barely have like 9-10 months on stage. In Oslo time, that's as much as it is. In say New York time, that's nothing. That's a month. That's a month of stage time in New York. Right? So I feel like I'm an infant. I'm barely crawling. I'm still crying. And that's the age I'm at in stand-up. And when I look at sort of expert level comedians who are like who've been doing it for years and years and years, and I see the gap between them and myself, and I go, oh wow, okay, now I see that gap. It makes it easier to bomb. Because, because you go, the only way he got that good was by seeing what what's good and what's not good, and by trying over and over,
you have to bomb. You have to fail on the microphone in order to get good. You have to learn. I always say this: stand-up comedy will really, really humble the stand-up comic. You may think you're writing some of the funniest stuff since Richard Pryor, and then you get up there and it doesn't work. Okay, there's that humbling moment, and then the question is always, what do you do? What do you do with it? A lot of people ignore that humbling moment. A lot of people get crushed by that humbling moment. But it's the long-lasting stand-up who can be humbled and then learn something from it. Go back and look at your material, look at your delivery, and how are you going to fix it? I love doing stand-up. I miss it. I haven't done it since I think I did a show in June of last year. Late May, early June, maybe June of last year. And then before that, I hadn't done anything since late March. So you can say since March of last year, I really haven't done any stand-up, and boy, do I miss it. I miss it.
Yeah.
But I ain't trying to get sick with Corona, so I've been staying home. I got my first vaccine shot today.
Okay, cool. Oh, well done. No, I'm still waiting on mine.
Yeah. Maybe you see. I'm watered down. You're pure African, so you let the weak ones let the weak ones get the vaccine now.
I think we should have. I'm in the group. I'm in the age group that's gonna get it last, absolutely last, right? Like,
how old are you?
I'm 37 years old now.
30. I hate you. 37.
Okay, I hate everyone else going down.
And isn't that the way it is? Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is it that you're most occupied with now at this moment? There's a lot of stuff going on in the world, and you seem like the guy who gets behind a cause, or the guy who maybe tries to change things or influence things. Am I wrong?
No.
Am I wrong?
No. I had a phase. That was way back when I worked at the UN. And then I was like, nope, I'm going to the private sector and I'm never looking back. No.
So you don't see yourself being some kind of a diplomat or some sort of a person who works for the betterment of society in some way, in some professional way with some sort of organization? That's just not you?
I mean, I really no.
And I ask simply because of your background and your mother's background as the diplomat. I just wonder how much of that did you soak in?
Depends in what way, right?
Yeah.
I think that in terms of sort of my professional ambitions, they've been quite removed from sort of this is what I can do for the world or not. It was more sort of I want to get good at something and get really good at it, and so it was more sort of again, it was around that age as well. It was sort of my achiever self. I'm going. I want to get. So that's the plan. Of course, I think also there's been. I mean, I did try to start a company at one point.
An IT company.
Do some entrepreneurship.
IT.
It was an IT. It was an app. It was a pretty complicated app with a lot of complicated features.
What was the app supposed to do?
There's actually quite a few apps now that are doing the same thing. It was basically that I was built on the premise that when you use social media, when you use sort of Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you name all the GAFA companies and so on, you leave a data trail, and they use data trail to sell your attention to advertisers. Yeah. And they make a lot of money from this. In fact, some of the richest, the top 125 IT companies in the world are all IT advertising companies. That includes Alphabet and Facebook and so on, right? So the premise was to say that, look, there is actually a technical mechanism we can put in place that allows us to, sort of get rewarded for this data that we're sharing.
Yeah.
right? Why should I see all the random ads on there? Even if you say you're personalizing it, I'd still see a lot of random ads because
Yeah.
like, why not? Why can't I tell you my preferences and then you only show me those ads? And when I agree to share those preferences, you only show me those ads, and we both make something out of it,
Yeah.
right? You get paid for showing it to the advertiser, and I get paid for helping you show me this advertiser, and I buy something from.
Yeah.
It was an intensely complicated, I think, app to explain to people, which is one of the reasons why we struggled, right? But essentially, the idea was to say that your data has value, and in most cases, it's really possible for me to leverage that data to get some value back.
Right. Right.
There's a couple of companies now that are doing the same thing.
And so what got in the way of it? Was it the technicality, the complicated technology that got in the way of you finishing this, or was it financing?
No, I think that the technology we had built already. I think that was the easy part because we're all technical people. The easy part, that was the thing that we were strong at, right? We're all technical people with an IT background, and that was sort of not hard for us to do. But I think where we're weak on was all these sort of the business know-how. How do we structure, for example, financing? And I personally, and some of my colleagues as well, my partners as well, we use our own personal money to finance this, right? We use our own personal money to finance this.
Okay.
So that's sort of, again, like, why are you using your own money, bro? You don't do that in business.
Well, it's a heck of a motivator. It's a heck of a motivational factor.
Yeah, it's a heck of a motivational factor. And again, I think at the time, we all believed it. I personally believed this was the greatest idea in the world, and of course, I'll spend all my money on it. But it didn't quite work out. We learned a lot. We had some good traction. We won a fun competition in Paris, in France, a hackathon, where we we're coding for 28 hours straight, eating just chocolate and Coca-Cola and so on. And we managed to do a presentation that sort of gave us the first prize in that category, which is data. So that was really, really fun, and I learned a lot from it. But we didn't succeed. And I feel like, if anything, I have had an interest in and around sort of startups and sort of startup, I don't know, configurations, if you will, just sort of how they get started, what they do. But if I could say there's you have the bleeding heart founder, and then you have the mercenary. I'm definitely more on this side. I'm kind of like, give me a project, I'll work. That sort of, hey, let's save the world doing this.
Yeah.
But now I work for, at least my day job, right? I work for a firm called Canary, which delivers sort of really high tech managed services to in and around something called application performance monitoring, automation, and digital performance management. It's complicated speak, but essentially we do a lot of detailed looking at how things are working in your IT infrastructure and in your IT software, and how things are actually running to the code level.
So you're like a troubleshooter.
We're like I like to say we're like IT firefighters, right?
Yeah.
We find the IT fire, but we don't necessarily put it out. It's just that for organizations that are some of the largest companies that you have around, the majority of them are so big that it's not feasibly possible to expect a human to know where the problem is, even if they've been sort of head of IT for the last 10 years, right?
Yeah.
They probably were set up maybe 20, 30 years ago. The guy who built this, the guy who built that, they all left. It's not humanly feasible for them to know where all the problems arise, and all the new guys they hire and so on. So you use a lot of very expensive, very advanced software to help you draw a picture and figure out where these problems are. Right?
I see.
Yeah. But they still need sort of some technical competence or know-how to sort of interpret correctly, which is where you sort of get consultants in and around the field going, okay, we can help you sort of get value out of these tools.
So that's the kind of work, that's the kind of job that is pretty well insulated then in these times of Corona and COVID and things shutting down and whatnot. There's still plenty of work for you to do.
Yeah.
That must be a good feeling. That must be a good feeling.
It is. It's like in a video game where you go, you get a during a pandemic, you get a plus 15% productivity buff in this kind of job.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just because you have all the time. I mean, all this working from home, I can cut out the commute to work. I can cut out sort of any complicated lunch plans. I can cut out a lot of the coffee machine chats and so on. And, you know, probably start work a lot earlier than I would and probably work a lot later than I would. Maybe eat very close to my laptop or to my desk. So it's I think
sorry about that.
No worries.
I'm such a professional podcast host, as you can see.
No worries. I'm noticing that I'm kind of sweaty, and I want to change my T-shirt because I keep seeing my armpits. I'm like, okay, this is why I thought I was making jokes about sweaty Africans.
I was just gonna say, don't get me started. Don't get me started.
I'm like, this is why I'm making jokes. It's like, look, I work out, okay? I
have a high metabolism, okay?
A high metabolism, literally. I'm a hard gainer, okay?
I love it, man. So when is the next time you're going on stage? Do you have any performances lined up?
Oh, nothing planned.
Just jump on an open mic if it shows up somewhere?
Probably. To be honest with you, I'm a bit disappointed with myself in that category, in that regards, because sort of all the books of stand-up I've been reading have a little section where they go, don't tell me about how you can't find places to do stand-up. Don't tell me about any of that. If you want to do stand-up, you'll find a place, you'll find a way to do stand-up. They then tell you all these legendary stories about people who were sort of like, okay, Christmas, everybody snowed in. He organized shows in all of his neighborhoods' houses. So he'd show up in the living room and do bits. Bombing that way must have sucked, but he did it for a whole, season.
But a lot of us have kept things going by doing, comedy on Zoom and things like that. But I got asked to do it a lot, and I said no every single time. I don't think that I would be comfortable performing without having that direct contact with the audience. I love playing off of that audience. I don't think I've ever done a single show where I haven't interacted with several people in the audience based on their reaction or the look on their face and things like that. And you don't get that over video. It's just like my podcast, for example. People are supposed to be coming here to my home, to my studio, and doing it by video like this it's great, but it's just that it's so much better doing it face to face. And I feel that stand-up loses, for me anyway, it loses a big element, a huge element when it's not live face to face with that crowd.
Yeah, no, I'm 100%.
You agree with that? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think somebody was telling me that Roy Wood Jr.
Yes.
is a comedian on the Daily Show.
Yeah.
And also comedian in his own right, well known for the Daily Show. Anyway, he was saying apparently that if you're not trying to do stand-up online, by the time the world comes back, you'll be a dried-up husk. And I think, I remember I heard that and I thought, I think if you've already established, much like he has, a sort of digital presence, a digital persona, where you go, okay, you expect to see me in this channel on this platform. I think for him, it's a different. He loses a lot more from taking a break right now, right? Whereas I'm an open micer. I've been around being in trying to do stand up for a year or so. I'm not necessarily at a level of skill where I have to keep it going all the time, right? And again, I have a day job that I love. Stand-up has really been a sort of like, this is really fun. I'm going to pursue it so long as I feel like it's fun and I feel like I can get good at it. That was sort of the only idea I have around it.
Yeah.
And up until sort of like...
No, I was going to say, I guess people could do like those little, 30-second Instagram reels and or even TikTok. Do those little short TikTok things. But that's not stand-up. That's just a short little comedy sketch. That's possible to do. But doing stand-up comedy on video, I
don't feel like taking a break for 6 months or so is going to kill me right now, because everyone is taking a break. If everyone else wasn't taking a break and I was taking a break, I would be like, FOMO, I want to be on stage right now.
Well, I've used this past year it's like, okay, I'm not going to get on stage, but there's still, in fact, there's probably even a better opportunity now to create. So I'm still writing, even though I have no intention of getting on stage in the near future. I'm still writing that material. I'm still going over it in my head. I haven't, I don't speak into a dictaphone and then listen to that. Would be weird, but I am writing and I'm going over it in my head and trying to think about the timing and the delivery of it all, so that when things open up again and when I feel comfortable, then I'll just jump right back into it. And then, and go through that self-editing process again and stuff. But I won't be jumping into that cold at all. So I understand what Roy Williams is saying, but yeah, I don't think you need to get on a video and do stand up in order to keep your chops up. I don't believe that's necessary.
Yeah, I don't feel that's necessary for me, at least either. Maybe for some comedians, but at least
might work
for me,
some.
Yeah. And I completely agree with you. Stand up is sort of it's a give and take thing. My set would probably change based on how people are reacting to sort of what I'm saying.
Yeah. Mine definitely does.
Maybe not change sort of like, I'm throwing everything out, but I might spend more time sort of fleshing something out or move more quickly to something that I think is more relatable or whatever, right? But it will be a response to that moment. And I feel like if I can't respond to that moment, it's not the same thing.
Well, yeah, I like to tell a story. My stand-up comedy isn't jokes, it's stories. That are funny, hopefully. And I like to write those stories with a threefold punchline or a threefold wrap up to that story. In other words, story, punchline, hopefully laughter, maybe maybe some sort of verbal response from the crowd, from an individual in the crowd, which will then lead me to the second part of the punchline. Hopefully more laughter, and then boom, the third. So every story I tell, I write in 3 stages that are hopefully going to escalate the laughter or escalate or magnify the point in each stage. But that doesn't work on video because it's dependent on what kind of reaction the crowd gives. But that's me. That's me.
I get that. Yeah. John, can we take a 2-minute break?
We can do that. Yeah, and I'll edit this out. Yeah. Or maybe not. You got to go take it.
All right. And we are back.
There we go. And we are back. There you go. Look at that. A wardrobe change. Wardrobe change.
Now I feel very African. I was like,
hey, but Africans, y'all clean it up. You have that. I bet you've got a pair of sweatpants that match, a pair of shoes that match, and some kind of hat that matches. Now that's gloves African. Too. And gloves. And gloves. Oh man, I love it.
When I go to the court and I'm like, I still remember playing ball 20 years ago. Air balls. Like, I look too good to be missing right now.
I used to, gosh, I haven't played basketball in years. Wow.
Yeah.
I played when I was, I was real good when I was younger, like in high school and all that. But my thing was American football.
Oh, I love American football.
That was my sport. Yeah.
I love watching football. I
was a tailback. I was a tailback. I was one of them short, stocky, quick-moving guys. Yeah.
Okay. Epic. No, I have a cousin who was a running back in Canada, actually.
Oh yeah, Canada.
Yeah. No, I'm a big fan of the sport. Could never play it myself, but I'm a big fan of the sport.
I think it's the greatest sport out there. The athleticism that it demands. Not only do you have to be strong, you have to have endurance, you have to have quickness.
Yes.
And I think football players, American football players, are the best athletes in the world.
Oh, guaranteed, hands down. I can't think of any sport that requires that wide skill set.
Yeah.
And I think if you put sort of any other athlete against an American football player, I'd be like, let's compete at anything, anything you want.
Anything. Yeah.
Like, let's play your sport. American football players will be sort of up there.
Everybody. People may not classify themselves as this, but I believe that everybody is a dreamer. Everybody's on a path. Everybody wants to better their life. Everybody wants to better the lives of their friends and family and people around them. Tell me a little bit about your hopes and dreams. You're in your you're in your mid 30s now.
Yeah.
And let's say when you're my age, I'm 52. Where do you want to be when you're 52? What do you want to be doing? What's happening with Anthony Kalinde?
I want a bigger fro. I want it to be like
well
no, I was thinking I always joke that I'll be at a beach house in Malawi making swords, right? Just like samurai swords, just learning this meticulous, slow, and I'll have this like gray-haired afro just ding. That's the sort of that's the one I would always joke about, right? But I've always I've grown up in and around my mother's sort of my mother's son, right? My mother's job sort of she brought it home a lot of times, and I think for the most part it imbued, I think, in most of my family, this sense of, hey, we have to do our part for sort of where we come from, just because if we have sort of the upbringing and education and skill set to sort of go home and do something, if we don't, who will?
Exactly.
And I know that sort of personally for as long as I've grown up, I've always had in the back of my head that at some point I'm going to go home and I'm going to sort of help set up shop, and I'm going to help sort of, improve things. Now I'm 37. I've sort of put on paper sort of a plan where I go, okay, over the next sort of 5 to 8 years, I want to transition towards sort of having this much sort of time or effort I can spend in sort of working on a project back home, right? And that's quite motivating for me, just because I feel like there is so much opportunity in Africa for Africans, for members of the diaspora like myself, to do a lot of things in Africa, for the better of Africa. And I feel like that's something that's within a lot of people's reach. It might seem arrogant to be like, well, if you just say that, if we have the skill set, so we don't go back, who will, kind of thing, as people back home don't have the skill set. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. But I would like to say that it's there's certain sort of slightly more relaxed access to things that sort of does enable some things to move more quickly. For example, my internet's never slow over here, right? So if I want to sort of learn anything, play with anything, I can literally get it within a few minutes.
Yeah.
Right. Any subject in the world within a few minutes. Whereas if I'm sort of back home and I have the same initiative, that will take me quite much longer time, and it will cost me a lot more because bandwidth here is super expensive. So I think being able to, if I could help lower the cost of internet bandwidth, I'd call that a win, right? If I could lower it by $1, I'd call that a win.
In some of these African countries, I'm not too familiar with the situation in Malawi, but I would imagine that internet access to all citizens would drastically change things. Imagine what that would do for the vision of some of those people. And again, it's not, like you said, it's not being said from a position of arrogance or a position of feeling self-important. It's just the fact that when you've traveled like you have, when you have experienced what Northern and Western Europe has to offer. It does something with your vision. It does something with your ambition. It tells you that maybe it tells you that some things that you never would have thought were possible if you had stayed home in Malawi, now you see that they are possible. And that's some great knowledge to be able to bring back home and put to practical use for the people there.
And I think you know, I kind of say it jokingly, but a happy childhood is expensive.
My grandmother always used to say, money will not buy you happiness, but it will pay for the search for happiness.
It will pay for the search. And a happy childhood is expensive. A happy childhood means somebody provided quite a lot, and not just a lot in terms of sort of body coverings, shelter, and food, to put it that way. But in terms of, they provided infrastructure or access to infrastructure. And that is quite hard to sort of quantify how expensive that access is. So I think even when you grow up, say, in Malawi, I have friends who sort of have never lived outside of Malawi who, you know, we'll have a conversation, and we're peers in the way that like the Malawian fisherman has more in common with the Northern Norwegian fisherman than he does with me, right? Whereas me in Oslo, or white ethnic Norwegian person in Oslo has working and sort of living a typical sort of urban life, has a lot more in common with someone living an urban life anywhere in the world.
That's right.
Wake up in the morning, check my phone, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. Go about my errands, maybe have some food, use one of my appliances to make food or juice or whatever. Use one of my appliances to do something with my face or whatever. Use one of my gadgets to beam me bandwidth internet, and so on. We have a similar sort of noosphere, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like more and more as time goes on, that will be the distinction of a peer group. It'll be how different our first thought and last thought of the day are. Right. If I'm a fisherman in Malawi or a fisherman in the north of Norway, my first thought in the morning isn't really going to be check my face. It might be, but more often than not, it'll be, all right, time to go out and get some fish. It's 4 a.m. Yeah. Right. So I think that, and that goes back to what I was saying about identity earlier, right? I feel like sort of having access to internet gives you another way to identify with the world. And so it changes your identity.
That's a good tie-in to the very first question that I asked you.
Because I was like, I don't have an answer right now, but it's working. It's a non-neural typical brain takes a while.
Well, if I haven't done anything else for you, you can at least say I made you think today. Listen, Anthony, I have really enjoyed this conversation. I want to keep talking, but I can't. I have to go check in on my Snoopy before she goes to work. She's working night shift tonight. I gotta holler at her for a second before she leaves.
Yeah, no worries. It was a pleasure talking to you.
I should be a little irritated with myself that it took me this long to have you on, because actually, you know, I said briefly at the beginning of this episode that Eirik has been after me for a long time to talk with you. Actually, it was that night. Now that I think about it, it was that very first night at Steinar's that he said, he even pointed you out. Now, and I didn't get it. I think I said hi to you very briefly. And my intention was to talk with you because he pointed you out. He said, that guy over there, you've got to go talk to him. You have to get him on your podcast. And I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. And then one thing led to another. I never got to talk with you that night. So shame on me. Shame on me.
No worries. I finally got to talk. Hopefully we can do it again when there's like more stand-up going around and sort of that is more alive in my head and whatnot.
Well, the way I look at it, as we live life, we gain experiences, and then there's more to talk about. And that's what my podcast is all about: conversations with good people about their lives, their observations, and what's going on. And like Eirik said, you're an interesting guy, and you're living a life that is very much outside the normal, not just for the average Malawian, but for anyone. You've had a very interesting life, and I appreciate you sharing some of that with me today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. And you as well. You seem to have a very interesting life.
I
And
do. I'm
thank you for
blessed.
sharing that with me and for sharing your podcast with all of us.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate my listeners. I get emotional when I think about all that I've learned from the different guests that I've had. I've had a lot of different people. I think your episode is going to be around 125th, 26th episode, something like that.
Wow.
That's a lot of conversations with a lot of people, and I've learned something new from each and every one of them. And you're part of that family now. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for teaching me.
Cheers. My pleasure. My pleasure. I'm glad I could be here.
Will you stick around for a minute? I want to say a couple of words to my audience, and I want to talk to you. So don't hang up.
Sure thing.
Okay. Thanks everybody for watching. If you're watching me on YouTube, remember to click that little bell icon. That lets you get a notification every time I release a new episode. If you're listening to me on another podcast platform, subscribe. Thank you all for your time. Thanks for your ears. I hope this didn't hurt. Bye, everybody. Okay, there we go.